A lot of men reach midlife and look back at their younger years with a specific kind of grief, not for the dramatic failures, for the ordinary years. The years spent chasing the wrong things, or not knowing what they wanted, or knowing and not doing it anyway. And the word that surfaces quietly, persistently, is waste. I waste my youth. It's one of the most painful thoughts a man can have, and one of the most misunderstood. I want to be honest about where this feeling comes from, because it's not simple. It's not just nostalgia. It's not just regret for specific choices. It's something more global than that. The sense that the version of you that existed in those open, unformed, those everything still possible years, that version didn't make the most of what it had. Didn't take the risks, didn't follow the thing, spent too long conforming, performing, waiting. Too long being the version others expected, and not nearly long enough being the version that was actually there. And now, those years are behind you. The body is different. The responsibilities are real. The open horizon has a different quality than it did at 25. And the thought arrives, what did I do with all that time? I think this feeling is close to universal among men in midlife, and almost universally misread, because the feeling of waste looks backward. It lives in the past. And so most men treat it as a judgment on the past. Evidence that the younger self failed somehow, made bad choices, wasn't brave enough, didn't know enough, squandered something that can't be recovered. And that reading, understandable as it is, produces a specific kind of suffering. The suffering of a verdict already rendered, a sentence already handed down, a past already fixed and unreachable. But what I've come to understand, and it took a long time to see this clearly, is that the feeling of wasted youth is almost never actually about the past. It's about the present. Specifically about something in the present that the past is being used to explain or justify something still not done, something still not risked, something still living in the future that the younger version already deferred. But here is the strange part. The years that most men describe as wasted almost never look like waste from the outside. They were years of living, of trying things, of building things, of being young in all the complicated, unresolved ways that being young actually requires. But most men misunderstand this completely, because they're measuring those years against a standard that didn't exist when they were living them. The standard of the man they became. And of course, the 22-year-old falls short of the 47-year-old's judgment. He didn't have the experience yet, the self-knowledge, the clarity, the understanding of what actually mattered that only 2 decades of living could produce. He was doing what a young man does, figuring it out in real time, with incomplete information, under pressure he didn't fully understand. And calling that waste, it's like judging a first draft by the standards of the finished work. The draft wasn't waste. The draft was necessary. Here's something worth sitting with. Youth was not designed for getting it right. Youth was designed for learning what right means to you. The experiments, the failures, the versions of yourself you tried on and discarded. The relationships that formed and dissolved. The careers started and abandoned. The dreams pursued, pathway, and then interrupted in reality, by reality, interrupted by reality. None of that was waste. That was the curriculum, the specific, personal, irreplaceable curriculum of becoming a self. And the self that emerged from all of it, the man standing here now with all his clarity and his hard-won understanding, he is the product of exactly those years. Not despite them, because of them. And this is where things become interesting. Because the feeling of wasted youth often arrives precisely when a man is becoming more honestly himself than he ever was in youth. The clarity he now has that the younger self lacked is what makes the younger self look inadequate. But the clarity came from the years. The inadequate years produced the adequate man. And calling that waste misses the only thing that was actually happening. The slow, invisible, necessary work of becoming. And something changes after 40 and after 50 in how a man sees his own history. When you're younger, the past is recent enough to still feel like something you could have changed. The choices are close. The context is alive. You remember the crossroads the decisions, the moments when things could have gone differently. But after 40 and after 50, the past starts to feel more fixed, more finished. And the finishedness, that quality of a permanent record, is partly what makes the grief of wasted youth so sharp. Not just that things went in a certain way, but that they went that way and can't be revised. And most men, when they feel this sharpness, do one of two things. They either live in the regret, returning to the past mentally and rewriting it, mourning it, measuring it, or they suppress it, file it under things that can't be changed, and keep moving. Most men never notice there is a third option: to let the past be what it was, complete, unrevisable, genuinely yours, and to let the feeling of loss point forward rather than backward, toward what is still available, what hasn't been done yet, what the man who learned from all those years is now actually capable of. Here is the psychological truth at the center of this feeling. When a man says he wasted his youth, he usually means one of two things. The first is, I wasn't fully present for it. I was moving through those years, managing, performing, conforming, without really inhabiting them, without the quality of presence that would have made them feel real. And that's a real loss. And it's worth acknowledging. But it's also not unique to youth. Most men have spent most of their lives not fully present in their own experience. Youth wasn't the exception. It was the beginning of a pattern that continued well into adulthood. And the pattern, not the youth, the pattern, it's what's worth addressing. Now, the second thing men mean is, I didn't become who I wanted to be. The life I'm living now isn't the version I imagined when I was younger. The man I am isn't the man I thought I'd be. And here is what I want to say about it. The man you imagined at 22 was imagined by someone who didn't know yet what it meant to be a man, who hadn't lived through the things that produce actual character, who hadn't made the real choices and the real pressure, who hadn't loved and lost and built and failed in the ways that actually shape a person. The man you are now, flawed, uncertain, wiser than he seems, is more real than that imagined version ever was, and more worth being. So let me ask you something. When you think about the years you feel you wasted, the time that feels lost or misused or spent on the wrong things. What specifically do you wish had been different? Not the outcomes, not the achievements, the quality of being there. Were there years where you were going through the motions without being genuinely present? Were there people you were with, but not really with? There were versions of yourself, more honest, more alive, more genuine, that were present, but never quite given permission to show up. Because the answer to any of those is yes. And for most men, the honest answer is yes. The question isn't how to reclaim those years. The question is whether the same patterns are still running now. Whether the same absence from your own experience and from the people around you is still the operating mode. Because the years ahead are not yet determined. They can be inhabited differently, more consciously, more honestly, with more of the actual person present in them. That's not a compensation from the past. That's just the choice that's available now, at this moment, for you. Men feel they wasted their youth because they're measuring the past with the eyes of the present. And the present has clarity. The past didn't. But here is what clarity is actually for. Not to render a verdict on the years already lived. To inform the years still ahead. The man who looks back and sees what he missed, the presence, the honesty, the willingness to be fully there, has been given the most useful gift available to him. He knows what he was missing. And knowing what was missing is the first step toward no longer missing it. Not in the past, in the present. The years behind you are finished. They were what they were. And they produced the man standing here, which is not nothing. The years ahead are not. They can have a different quality. More presence, more honesty, more of the actual self showing up. Not because the past was bad enough to deserve correction, but because the future is real enough to deserve the best version of the man who is still here to live it. In my case, I've made a kind of peace with my younger self, not by defending every choice he made, by understanding what he was doing, and that what he was doing, what he could, with what he had. He didn't know what I know now. And I wouldn't know what I know without having been him first. Every year, the good ones, the confused ones, the ones I'd revise if I could. Every year was part of the same long becoming. And the becoming isn't finished. That's what I keep coming back to. That the become isn't finished. There are still years ahead that haven't been lived yet. Still versions of myself that haven't been arrived at. And wasting them in grief over the past would be the only real waste left available. I don't know. This was a bit about me in this video. I'd like to know about you. If you want to share that in the comments. And also let me know if you like these videos and want me to create more by hitting the like button. And be subscribed if you want to continue these walks with me and my dog. But you can find the next video here. And so I'd like to meet you there. See you there.